Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of a new podcast called the Retro LaunchPod. I'm Wesley Whatnot. I want to explain how you can get in touch with it, what the podcast is going to be like, how often it will be available, and I want to address the controversy surrounding the Minnesota Star Trek Nerd podcast, and why it will never ever be done ever again. Let's talk about how you can get in touch with it. There is no Facebook page. There will be a YouTube channel to this episode, but there will be no Twitter account, and I'll get to that later on. But if you want to contact the podcast, you can email the podcast at retrolaunchpod@gmail.com. I will take feedback on the YouTube channel. That's the only place you'll get comments and stuff like that. And that's how we're going to go with this. Why I'm going to go with an alias for this podcast is going to be talked about in the when I address the controversy. Now, I want to talk about what this podcast is. I love old stuff. I love old video games. I love old TV shows. I love old films. You know, stuff from... I'm going to limit myself from like the 60s all the way up until probably about 2010 for like retro stuff. But if I talk about like old video games, I'm going to talk about stuff from like the 90s and early 2000s, since I have a lot of those games. I actually have them here with me right now as I speak. So, but I want to talk about old films too, old TV shows, some of which are still ongoing. So if I talk about an ongoing show, I want to talk about like the old stuff that occurred with the show. Like, for example, The Simpsons, for example. If I ended up talking about The Simpsons, I want to talk about just like the first 10 seasons and maybe the film. And maybe The Simpsons movie from 2007. But that's how far I will go. That's that for ongoing series such as that. And stuff like that. Like, and SpongeBob, for example, it's still going on. Maybe the first 100 episodes. And maybe the first film. But I want to talk about why this podcast is going to... It's going to be... I'm going to try to do I'm going to try to do 2 to 3 episodes a month. I'm not going to do a twice weekly podcast anymore. That will be explained later on. But I am not going to do 8 episodes a month anymore. It drove me and my fiance drove a wedge in our relationship, so unfortunately. But if I end up doing 4 episodes a month, that would be once every week, and they will be released on Wednesdays, by the way, folks. Starting with this episode, every episode will be on Wednesdays. I have no idea what time yet, but I'm leaning towards probably like midnight again. Midnight, 12 a.m. Central Standard Time, when they will be released, but they will be released on Wednesdays. So, and you have the whole day to listen to it. And they're probably going to range from anywhere from 30 minutes to as much as an hour, depending on how I feel talking about it. Because if I had talking about a half hour, I would cap it at that, or 45 minutes. But I don't intend to go blabbing about forever and stuff like that. I'm not going to have any guests, that kind of thing, at least for a while. Like I said, I'll explain that later on. Why? But I love old things. The bottom line is, I want to talk about old video games. I want to talk about old films, old TV shows, because I actually like to watch them. Like, for example, for old TV shows, I like to watch MASH, I like to watch Home Improvement, Seinfeld, The Office can be included, just the first 7 seasons. past Steve Carell. Sorry, not going to include that. But The Office can be included. Stuff like that. Star Trek is going to be a part of this because I love Star Trek, and I'll explain that later on. But Star Trek will be a part of this podcast, just not as much. I want to talk about the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. I am not going to talk about the new stuff that's coming out, such as Discovery, the Picard series, Lower Decks, Section 31, the Kids series on Nickelodeon. I don't want to talk about any of that stuff, and I'll explain later why. Because that's not old stuff. That's technically still new, in my opinion. So about from like 1960 all the way to 2010. So that's 50 years worth of television, films, video games, that sort of thing. I mean, like old shows. I like the Brady Bunch as well. And, as I record this, we're approaching this 50th anniversary since it first aired. So I might be doing a Brady Bunch thing in September of this year. Who knows? Good, but we'll find. But I have ideas in mind for what I want to do. So if I do 2 or 3 episodes a month, or at max 4, there'll be 4 episodes a month. I'm not going to go any higher than that. I'm not going to go any lower than 2. So 2 to 4 episodes a month. I want to talk about the series first. That's how it's going to be. It's going to be like a monthly theme. Like, for example, if I do in June or July, let's say like that. July, I do MASH. As the whole month, I talk about the series itself, what I think about it. Then I talk about character moments in the next episode. Like, my favorite character moments. I probably do like top 10 character moments from every cast member, every character on the show. Main character. And then it'd be included that, And then I would do like a top 25 episodes of MASH. So that's 3 episodes, But if I decide to do a 4th one, it'll be like a surprise kind of thing, I don't know what I would do for that, but I will do between 2 and 4 episodes a month, and it'll be a theme. So I think it's kind of unique to do a theme per month kind of thing, because if I ended up doing like old shows and stuff like that, and just did the whole 2-3 episode thing in like once a month, that'd be like a little bit too much for you to listen to. So that's why I'm gonna break it up. I say like I do a MASH, I do, like I said, do like a review of the series, character moments for the next episode, and then top episodes, and my favorite episodes, in my opinion. Granted, these are all going to be my opinions about every single show, movie, video game I talk about. Regarding the video games, I'm going to talk about any video game that I have currently here with me at the moment. That I have a bunch of Sega Genesis, I have a bunch of Super Nintendo, I have a bunch of N64 games, I have a bunch of PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 games. But like I said, I'm not gonna talk about PS4, PS3 games. I do have other systems, but I do not have them here. So if I do end up talking about them, I probably would go from memory on those. But there are certain games that systems I will not touch. For example, I have a PlayStation 4. I use it to watch Hulu and Netflix and CBS All Access, which has the new Star Trek show Discovery, and which will be the home of all things new Star Trek and the reboot of Twilight Zone. But I'm not going to talk about the reboot. Reboots, remakes are not going to be included. I mean, granted, there will be some of the reboots, remakes are not going to be included. That includes, unfortunately, I am not going to talk about the 3 Kelvin timeline films from Star Trek. That includes Star Trek 09, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. Because technically, that's considered new still. Even though next month, this is going to be April, so next month will be 10 years since the Kelvin timeline started. But it's still technically new. So I'm not going to talk about them. So I'm going to, for that kind of thing, for the Star Trek films, just talk about the first 10. No one's picture all the way through Nemesis. So that's how it's going to be structured. 2 to 4 episodes. Like, to reiterate one last time, 2 to 4 episodes a month. It will be a theme for the month, and you'll know when I talk about it on the before the next month. With the last episode of the month previous, the next episode previous, you'll hear that. But I'm just going to say this much. And then it'd be just, that's how it's going to be. And I think it's pretty unique. So I hope that you will follow along and, it'll be like 2 to 4 episodes a month. Now, I want to talk about the controversy. I was told recently that what has gone on in the last 2 months has still followed me. I want to say something about it. The Minnesota Star Trek Nerd Podcast is no more. It hasn't been since right before Valentine's Day of this year. Why? Because my personal Twitter account I've had since 2009 was exposed from my personal. Someone decided to expose me for who I was. And, I used to be. I used to be a very pro. I was very in support of the current U.S. president, and I had a lot of not very nice things to say regarding certain things and stuff like that. Like 7 screenshots were taken, and they've been circulating ever since. I'm just saying right now, but because people are still complaining about me. Listen, folks, if you're hearing this right now, I am truly sorry again. I want to apologize again. I've done nothing regarding podcasting since that happened. Until this episode. Until I started doing this new podcast. I figured it was time to come back. Because I think I've done what I could to try and rectify in my mind, try to rectify what I did before. I know that I have a long way to go still. But I have changed my opinions about a lot of things since that happened. A lot of things. And this is why the Retro LaunchPod will not have a Twitter account. Because I don't want to run the risk of having that happening again. And why there will be no guests for a while. And why I'm not doing it very often anymore. This podcasting. I miss it. That's why I'm doing it. But I'm not doing it as nearly as often as I once did. When I hosted the Minnesota Star Trek Nerd Podcast using my real name, I was respected, but then I lost everything. I did. And I've thought about what I've said. I really have. I know I've made mistakes. And I know I cannot change what I said previously. And I know I can't. And I really know I can't. But there's one thing I want to say too. I am part of a 12-step self-help group. Been that way since my father started going into the same group in 2009, 2008, late 2008, early 2009. And I want to reiterate that part of the prayer that they do, and they say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I want to reiterate that I've accepted the things I cannot change, which was what I said previously. I am working to change the things I can, which is to change my opinions about things. And I have. That was what happened to me was a big eye-opener to me. It really was. It really was. But I also want to say that as I'm trying to change my opinions, and I changed most of them. I know I have. But I know some of you who might be listening probably think I still am that way. And I understand. I really do. I completely understand why you would still think I'd be that way that I was before. I am a decent human being. I am a human being, for goodness sakes. I mean, granted, yes, my reputation took a bit of a beating, but I know that I want to get back to where I was before. I cannot change what I said, but I want to reiterate that I am sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That is not who I really, really am. I used Twitter for a wrong reason. I did. I seriously did. I used Twitter for the wrong reasons. I used Twitter to air my personal opinions. Because I kept it away from Facebook for a really big reason. Because when the election in 2016 happened, I lost a lot of friends from that. And now I've lost more friends because of what I did on Twitter. Listen, folks. If you're hearing this right now, I know if you're listening to this and you're mad at me for for podcasting still, I understand that you might be angry with me, and you might still be if you're listening to this. I understand. Completely. I don't expect you to forgive me so easily. That was one thing I accepted the moment it happened. I lost a lot of friends that day. Some of the people I actually got to know and respect very, very well. Granted, I had to defend myself to one of them. But this is not CIS, white, gender, male privilege, whatever it is. I'm drawing attention to what I did because it's important. I made a mistake. And I've learned from my mistakes. And I want to reiterate this too. We are all human. We are not infallible. If we were perfect, we'd be someone else. But I'm not going to reiterate that because I don't want to put my religious beliefs in there. Because it's not appropriate, first of all. But I loved doing a podcast. And that is why this podcast is going to exist. The Retro LaunchPod is pretty much my return to podcasting. I love this. And I love talking about old stuff. And this was something I actually had planned for a while. The previous podcast put a wedge in my relationship with my fiance. And I'm just, in my personal life, it put a wedge in my personal life. It really did. And that's why it's not going to be on, this podcast is not going to be on as often. But when it is, you'll know, obviously, because you'll get a notification in your podcast feeds. But I want to reiterate again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I really am. I've done whatever I could to change what you think of me. And it is now up to you to decide whether or not you're going to trust me again. Because if you do not trust me again, it's okay. I don't expect you to trust me so easily either. I don't expect you to forgive me so easily either. But I know I'm going in circles about this. But it's important to make light of it. It's been 2 months since that happened. And in that 2 months, I have done what I like I said before, I've had the courage to change the things I could, which was my opinions. And the wisdom to know the difference. The wisdom to know the difference is between what I said before and what I think now. Because I know I lost a lot of respect. a lot of people hate me now. I mean, probably not a lot of people. I just want to say this too. I am sorry. I'm not trying to go in circles. I just want to make light of my mistakes. I've made mistakes. And we're all human. I am not a perfect person. None of us are. You know? We are not Captain Picard and the crew of the Enterprise. To put a Star Trek reference on the thing. Speaking of Star Trek, after what happened, I nearly lost my fandom. I nearly did. Because what had happened shook me to the very core, to the point where I couldn't think about Star Trek anymore. I almost canceled my CBS All Access subscription, which probably should have been the best thing to do. But, in my opinion, in retrospect, I wish I had and put all my Star Trek things away. I mean, you know, I was thinking about that. I actually thought about having my dad come here, where I live, and take all my Star Trek things away and put them somewhere, and take them. And when I was ready, I would want them back. I had that inkling. I almost lost my Star Trek fandom. I almost did. I was about 95% sure I wanted to not watch Star Trek anymore. Because what I had done had not done anything about that. So, when I talk about Star Trek, which won't be for a while, FYI, it will not be for a while on this podcast, this new podcast, I just wanted to, I've kind of regained it, you know, because, you know, I was at a really bad place in my personal life and personal feelings, stuff like that, you know. Part of me almost, I mean, I was a little bit, I'm not gonna shed light, I mean, I put light on this, I almost committed suicide. Because, you know, what I had done was pretty much saying, you should die for what you said. And, you know, I almost felt that way. I did. But I don't expect anyone to forgive me. I don't expect anyone to listen. I don't expect people to just, you know, say, you know, I don't know. I can't stress it enough. I made a mistake. And I'm hoping that with this new podcast, I can get back to what I was doing right before that happened, which was talking about things I enjoy most, which was talking about things I love most, which is going to be this podcast, talking about, you know, any old stuff from 1960 to 2010, maybe some 50s things, I don't know. Because one of the shows I want to talk about is Dragnet, obviously, and that started in the 50s, but I want to talk about the 60s version. But I really hope that you'll listen, hear me out, and don't shut it off because you're hearing my voice and you're going like, why is this person back on the podcasting airwaves? You know, because I miss podcasting. I miss it. And that's why I've actually turned myself off from podcasting. I mean, I actually did. And now hopefully slowly I can get back to where I was before this happened. And hopefully I can regain your trust again.
We're going to stumble, make mistakes, I'm sure more than a few before we find our footing. But we're going to learn from those mistakes. That's what being human is all about. Thank you for listening today. And once again,
This is the Retro LaunchPod, and this is Wesley Whatnot. Take care, and good night.